Good afternoon, everyone. To those of you here in the auditorium at Swiss Re, and to everyone who has logged in online, you're all very welcome. My name is Aidan McCormack, and I'm the Swiss Re Group Head of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion. It's my real pleasure to welcome you to Swiss Re, and my privilege to kick off the DiveIn Festival. So I'm looking forward to sharing with you our DEI story here at Swiss Re, and indeed to hearing and learning from your stories. So a little bit of context, perhaps. So earlier this year, the PwC team approached us with the idea of working together on a white paper, exploring the connection between inclusion and agility, and highlighting in particular how that connection can positively impact both the lived experience of our people and therefore business outcomes. So we were very pleased and very delighted to say yes to being active participants in this project. So, as well as kicking off the DiveIn Festival, we're launching the white paper, Agility and DEI, and you'll hear a little bit more about this as the session continues. Now, before I go any further, it would be remiss not to say a huge thank you to everyone who's been involved in the event. Getting it all organized and underway has been no small feat, and also to the project team who have led the piece of work to develop and bring the white paper to life. And I want to call it in particular Juliana Wels for leading this project. So thank you. So at Swiss Re, we recognize the importance and the benefits of putting inclusion at the center of our own culture. And in fact, we've just refreshed our own DEI strategy to do just that. And we're about to launch a large multi-year inclusion experience journey for all of our staff. And I will be very happy to go into a lot more detail on that as the session continues, or even on a one-to-one basis after today's event. So we live in a time where a lot of our business is technology-driven and technology-enabled. This is no shock or news to anyone. And success in this environment requires people to be intentionally inclusive, open to change, and innately curious. And so reflecting on DEI and Agile, it's interesting to note that the most important prerequisites for an inclusive culture overlap with success factors of agile teams. Again, we'll go into this in some detail in a moment, but they include things like psychological safety, so an environment where everyone feels safe enough and secure enough to speak up and voice their opinions, where there's open and transparent collaboration, and finally, where everyone feels that their contribution is equally encouraged and equally valued. There is a risk, however, that we focus on Agile as a methodology and forget the importance of the Agile mindset as a key ingredient for success. And so while in theory there's quite a bit of overlap, the findings of the survey that we've done, that you'll read about in the white paper, have brought to light that most companies haven't actually thought about the links between the two things or joined the dots. That it's important for both agility and inclusion to meet people and teams where they are on their respective journeys, because not everyone will be in the same place. And that DEI and agility are increasingly important topics for clients and investors. We're starting to get a lot more questions about both from the people who are investing in our firms. So, like PwC, Swiss Re is deeply committed to creating an inclusive work environment where each employee can reach its full potential. Swiss Re also considers inclusion a strategic imperative that's integral to business success. So you're going to hear a little bit more on this from Kanak Tripathi, who's our head of transformation at Swiss Re Solutions, and from myself in my capacity as head of DEI here at Swiss Re, and hopefully we can share some insights that we've had on the links between Agile and DEI. So thank you for your attention, for being here today, for logging in online. And now it's my pleasure to pass over to Anna from Chubb. And once again, thank you for your participation, and I look forward to a very interesting dialogue for the rest of the afternoon. So, Anna.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So thank you very much as well for being here, and thank you for the invitation to participate along with my panel and my co-panelists. It's an honor for me to be part of this conversation because it is something that is very dear to my heart, and I think this is a work of passion and of personal conviction. And we hope to inspire you today with the exchange that we will have. Some food for thought, as Aidan already introduced. This is about defining agility, not just as a set of rules to follow, but as a mindset. How can it help bring and develop and incentivize a braver culture, and what does it mean to have a brave culture, and how do these two things work together? Since I was slightly introduced, I've been with Chubb for 9 years. Definitely inclusion is a deep part of our culture. It's something that we hold very dear to our hearts and to our business, since this really provides the way to get the best out of people, right? This really incentivizes people to bring their best and to grow as much as they can in our teams. This is definitely something that's dear to Chubb. In my capacity as Chubb, I am currently the head of our business development efforts for our B2B2C digital partnerships in the region, and I was formerly head of our local accident and health department here in Switzerland. The agenda for today. We will have a unfortunately brief discussion with the panelists. I wanted to kidnap them for 10 hours, but we have I won't keep you here for 10 hours, don't worry. We will then provide a toolkit that was developed by PwC in order to how to integrate the values that we will be speaking about today in an agile environment. There will be a breakout session. You will have a color that has been assigned to you. It's either green, yellow, or white. So in the breakout session, you will find a respective color-coded corner that you will be guided to, where you will have the opportunity to use the toolkit and to see how this works with 3 different topics: mental health, disability, and talent. And then we will come back to this room for a Q&A session. And hopefully, if my timing is Swiss timing, we will all be done by 6 o'clock. Our panelists. Just a question, are we connected with Kanak? Because one of our panelists is actually joining us from India. Kanak, hello. Very nice
Hi.
to see you. Okay, fantastic.
Lovely to see you.
So this is
Hi.
part of being agile, right? So Kanak is in Bangalore, so 4 hours ahead of us. Thank you so much for joining us. And now I can pass on to the introduction. So Kanak joins us from Bangalore. Kanak Tripathi, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. She is the head of transformation for Swiss Re Solutions. So this is Swiss Re's really tech and data-driven division for powered risk solutions. And her role now is going to be to take a team on a very exciting journey in the next 2 to 3 years to completely transform and create new business models where innovation and creativity and experimentation will be key. So the business model will be reinvented to create unique cutting-edge solutions for risk products, to develop new capacities and embed this transformation with values that she grew up with in India, values of equality, of courage, and of commitment to creating your own unique place in this world. So inclusion is very close to her heart. I think we can all say that same thing. So Kanak, thank you so much for joining us. And to the right is Johannes. Johannes Smits goes by Jupe. So Jupe is a partner at PwC in the people and organization practice. He has a long-standing career in HR and reward, and having worked for the likes of Volkswagen and Heineken before joining PwC as a consultant on the future of work. He has developed the toolkit, which he will be presenting in a bit later. And the last years, he's been fully focused on supporting companies across several industries in their diversity, equity, and inclusion journeys. And he currently leads then PwC's EMEA Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Center of Excellence. He is fundamentally driven in creating and unlocking value within people and within companies so that we create more and better impact for all stakeholders. So it's a privilege really to share the stage with you. Kanak, the first question is for you. What is Agile working, and how would you apply this to diversity, equity, and inclusion? A simple question.
Hi.
Simple question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. So my experience so far in the 16 years of leading transformations is that inclusive organizations, I think, are better prepared for agile. And what I mean by that is if we embrace truly agile ways of working, I think we create the right environment for inclusion, because a truly agile team would really not care about who you are and would value great ideas and expertise over anything else. But I think to look beyond difference, and I'm going to be a bit provocative here, we all have to challenge our own preferences and preconceived ideas. We all need a healthy amount of self-assurance, I think curiosity to learn and courage to be challenged. And all of this needs a great amount of inner work. Most of us are very egotistical and I think attached to what we believe is right. So I think it needs a lot of, especially as leaders, because we have to role model what we expect of our teams, to do a lot of this inner work. It's never easy and it's never going to be perfect, but I believe in intent. I think if we start with the right intent, we set the right environment, a safe environment, as Aidan put it, to be agile, right? So I think that's the first step that we all have to individually take, is to do this inner work and really challenge ourselves with what do we feel when we see somebody who's different from us? What is our reaction when we hear somebody who's at a polar opposite than we are, right? And to really react to our reactions from a place of self-compassion as well, right? And not to go into over criticism of our own selves, because we're all conditioned. So yeah, I think is the fundamental and the first step that we all need to take towards becoming more inclusive and therefore more agile.
Thank you. So, something that I really like about your role is that you're opening or creating a culture of experimentation, and it takes safety to be able to experiment, right? It's like a lot of psychological safety.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What are the keys for you to establish that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in a truly agile setup, and I'll give you a very simple example, and we're working on developing new products. We're working on a completely new setup. So we have an agile squad, for example, where our CEO is a contributor and he has to step away from his natural instinct and tendency to be in control and to take decisions, and let somebody else who's hierarchically maybe 3 or 4 levels, and I really don't like that word, right? But below him in the organization to take decisions, right? And I think that's in a truly agile setup, that's what we create. We take away these hierarchical layers and labels, and we really value the role that people play and the expertise that they bring, right? And we just have to do more and more of this.
And this is a question for both Kanak and Aidan. What is the role of your leadership in creating and enabling these cultures?
Yeah, so maybe I'll continue, and I'm very curious to hear what Aidan has to say. And this is again very personal, and I'm very driven by action. And I think we all have to take continuously actions that we believe will create a safe and an inclusive space. And again, I'm fangirling maybe a little bit right now, but I'm in India. I live in Zurich for the last 10 years, but I'm in India to meet our teams, some of our teams in Bangalore. And we were invited to talk. So Russell, the CEO, me, and another colleague were invited to talk to our teams here. And as I entered the room, I saw that there were 2 chairs up at the podium that were meant for Russell, who's a white man, and my colleague, who's another white man. And I wondered why there isn't a 3rd chair. And so very discreetly, Russell walked over and he brought a 3rd chair and just placed it on the podium, right? And I think that simple gesture said a lot about how he wanted me to be included, and he instantly realized that there was something strange going on here. For whatever reason, somebody had assumed that I'm not to sit there, right? So I think it all comes from a very unconscious place, but simple actions like these, I think, trigger and provoke a lot of thought. And instantly you could see the sort of energy shift in the room, right? And maybe a little bit of shame and guilt, hopefully not very unhealthy, but that was very thought-provoking for a lot of people. And another instance, just again, yesterday was I jokingly said something, and I said, "Oh, he's my boss," and he said, "No, I'm not your boss. I'm your colleague." And again, this was in front of 250 odd people, right? And I think just simple actions like those really provoke a lot of very fundamental beliefs. So I think that's what we have to do. We have to take small actions on a continuous basis.
Thank you, Kanak. Aidan?
Very eloquently put,
Yes.
Kanak. So maybe I don't repeat, but I build on that, and I think that role modeling actions is critical, absolutely. But I also think that words matter, and I'll give you an example here at Swiss Re. So on this very stage, a few weeks ago, our group CEO was giving one of his town halls. And the topic of DEI came up as a topic in the session. And Christian very naturally used words that maybe were not used to hearing in our very data-driven, numbers-driven environment. And he started talking about inclusion being a feeling. And you could see people sort of shift a little bit in their chairs and think this is different. And so what that does is it puts the language or the nomenclature in the public space and almost gives people permission to start using similar language. And this is what we're trying to do with our drive for inclusion. And so Christian will say things like diversity is a fact and inclusion is a feeling. And inclusion unlocks the power and the value of diversity. So leadership is super important, like really, really important. However, I think we should be careful that we don't assume that we as individuals don't have accountability here too, because our actions matter and our words matter. As much as anyone else's. So yes, the leadership role, super important, but we should all be mindful of the accountability we as individuals have for driving this culture of inclusion.
And in that, do you think ally programs are really helpful in this sense to encourage people to not be passive bystanders, to make these little daily gestures, to notice when things could be done a little better in a more inclusive fashion?
So yes is the short answer. Allyship is critical. Advocacy as well as allyship. I think we're moving to that space. The one comment I guess I would make there is that even if people don't identify immediately as allies or advocates for whatever reason, we need to create a culture where their view and voice and opinion is also included and valued and listened to. So it's absolutely everyone. We started using this term here at Swiss Re that inclusion isn't for some of us some of the time, it's for all of us all of the time.
I definitely agree from Chubb's perspective. I have to admit I'm biased. I grew up in California, so diversity is a key value for me. I thrive in diverse environments, and that's something that I found at Chubb here in Switzerland. It's a small. We're 80 people out of a group of 30,000. Or 33,000 across 54 countries. But even here, I think that the diversity factor really created what I missed in California, different cultures, different backgrounds, different ideas. And I think this really nurtures what you do in the business. And it creates kind of, I think what you were alluding to is this creativity that you need, especially when you're doing transformational change, right? You need people to be given dreams, and you need to tap into those dreams to drive your business to the next level. And I definitely think, as having grown up in California and being completely biased towards diversity, because I miss that cultural mix, and I think there's such richness to be driven out of there. And I'm glad that Chubb really has inclusion as a core value for this, because it's I've grown up with that richness, and I definitely seek it when I create teams to surround myself with very cultural diversity is definitely something that I thrive in. That's not my only bias. I'm not going to pretend I'm perfect, but it's.
If I'm allowed to just build on something that Aidan said about words, right? I think what's very critical is that even when we don't feel safe, because it's going to take some time to change, right? That we find the courage in ourselves to call out things when they're not right, or to say things that are unpopular, or to bring different ideas to the table. And this is a core value of mine, courage. And because it's not going to change overnight. So I think what Aidan said about it's not just about leaders. I think all of us have to dig deep and find the courage to say things and to take risks, and challenge those who are leaders, right? If they don't do the right thing, or say the right thing, or act in a certain way, I think we absolutely have to take a risk and call it out. That's the only way we can make change happen.
Right, because let's not limit leadership to people who actually hold that title, right? It's we can all lead in that effort, and I fully agree that we're all co-responsible for creating the culture that we want to experience at work, and in the personal life as well. Good, thank you so much. There's a lot more. Again, I wanted to kidnap these people for 10 hours. We are going to pass to the next section now and discuss a toolkit that was developed by PwC. And Chubb, you can discuss maybe the background to this, what drove you to this, what was driving you to create a toolkit where we merge, or we see the value of agility being merged with DEI core values, and how one reinforces the other. And what you found in the survey that might have been surprising, and what you think are some reasons of those results.
Thank you, Anna. So we basically started with this hypothesis over, a cup of coffee with a bunch of colleagues, and we were just discussing the fact that agile working is something that is ubiquitous if it comes to the insurance industry or the financial service industry, which is very much an industry that is known for stability, thrives by stability, but nonetheless is also subject to the world around us and all the developments that are there, the technological developments, of course, but also all the events that are coming to us, the COVID, of course, the recent war in Russia, and all other developments. So lots of companies have adopted agile working in actually companies that should be really stable, and that is super interesting. And as Aidan was saying, it's actually not just about methods and tools and processes. It's actually very much about how do we organize ourselves, and how do we move away from the silos that we were used to actually be working in agile teams where different people come together and are expected to be high performing straight away. You put people in a room, or nowadays in a virtual room, and from the get-go we have to be on top of things, right? And that is about a mindset, and that is about how do we work together? How do we actually make sure that we listen to each other? And that's where we thought, well, actually, wait a second, this is actually the kind of topics we also address if we speak about creating an inclusive culture. How do we actually create high-performing teams and make sure that people with different backgrounds and different ideas and different experiences, and I'm not just speaking about different identity characteristics, it's also different, the cognitive diversity. Very simply said, how do you make sure that the introverts get the space to speak in a room as much as the extroverts? Because it's not per se that the people with the loudest voices have the best ideas, right? But that's very often what happens. And that's all about how do we work together? How do we actually be impactful and create value in a very short time? Because agile working is also about doing things very quickly and very rapidly and with high impact. So we started from the hypothesis, okay, lots of these organizations are involved in agile journeys, and lots of the organizations are involved, like you were saying, the inclusion experience journeys, and those are journeys over a long period of time. So that's how the idea of a small pulse survey, as we call it, came about, and we interviewed about, I think, 12 organizations in the insurance and the reinsurance, insurance, and financial service industry, and we found that actually all those companies were indeed working on agile working, introducing agile working, and all the companies had some sort of a DE&I strategy, or at least thought about it. None of them had actually brought the two together. I think you said it in your introduction as well, which was probably the first kind of light bulb. Like, okay, but if it's so obvious that these companies are working with this, all the companies acknowledge that this is cultural change, both topics, right? Introducing agile working is actually more than anything a cultural change program. Adapting an inclusive culture is more than anything a cultural change program. But none of them had put it together, not even in the same change program, which was kind of an interesting one. One of the things that I found particularly interesting is that from the organizations that recognize that, about 1/3 of the organizations we interviewed recognized that DE&I is helping them to set them apart from the competition. So it's really a strategic imperative as at Swiss Re. And of those, let's say 1/3, 100% of them had embraced agile working beyond the IT department. Because, it's a reminder that agile working comes from software development approaches, and most organizations had started working with agile working in the IT department, but none of them had extended it to the wider organization. What we did see is that companies that had identified DE&I can actually help us to outperform our competitors. To say it very, they had also embraced agile further across the organization. So gone a step further on that. So we thought about how can we bring the two together, and how can we come up with this toolkit or a framework, or that basically brings agile working and DE&I together. And we started with the values, the Scrum values that are on the slide here. So the first of all, commitment. And values is really about how do we behave, right? How do we, in our scrums, in our tribes, in our basically the teams that are coming together for a specific task, or how do they need to behave? So commitment, courage, focus, openness, and respect. And we then started to look at those values with let's say, a DE&I lens. So what does it mean then? Mm-hmm. What if you, in those values, demonstrate inclusive behavior? Because that journey, the journey of change and behavior, it's very much, I think I see behavior very much as a muscle that you can train and develop. It's not set in stone. We can learn every day. And I think you asked me before the session, you said, so does it mean everybody has to go to psychology training or psychological training? And actually, I think yes, in some sort of way, yes. We have to make each other aware, and it doesn't always have to be in a classical setting. It can also be just that we help each other to understand what this is about.
Or how Kanak was referring to before, that this is personal work. You need to question yourself. You need to question your biases. We all have unconscious bias. Unconscious bias training should be everywhere, because I think everyone could benefit from this to go beyond our limited view of the world. But these values, they seem that they should be common sense, obvious, and yet they're not. Why?
Can you flip to the next slide?
Yeah.
We can see the outcome of the framework that we evolved. So what does it mean? The question is, because you say it's common sense, I fully agree, and it's almost kind of more consulting. Let's not use any bad words here, but more consulting stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So what does it mean to be committed if you think about an inclusive culture? So I think the first one is, as an organization, to continuously rethink, are we doing things right if it comes to our policies, our practices, our processes, the way we do things here if it comes to DE&I. But also for each individual. As you mentioned, personal biases. In every interaction, you're hindered or supported by our biases, which is, as we all know, part of us human beings being successful, but we need to be aware of them. And only if you're aware of them, you can actually manage and mitigate them. It's also about cultural awareness. We are in the organizations where we work, there's people from all over the place coming together, and they need to be impactful straight away. Well, then you need to understand how that works, and you need to understand some of those tools. Some people come from a more high context culture, some people from a more low context culture. My dear colleague who sits in the room, Aidan, he's British, I'm Dutch. We are sometimes, we say things in a different way from each other. And this high context, low context, friends, we need to understand how we express ourselves. But also, I see organizations that have people from Southern Europe or people from Northern Europe, and what can be funny in one place of the world can be absolutely inappropriate in another place of the world. Mm. I don't think that it means that you need to, put people on the spot, shoot them in between the eyes straight away, but actually help each other to understand what works and what doesn't work, and how to be successful together. Show courage, speaking up when no one else will. I mean, that's also a big one. We had that conversation also prior to we all see it, right? And it happens in a snap moment. All of a sudden, something doesn't feel right. Or if it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right. But then you need to have the safety, psychological safety, to make actually the comment and say, I'm not sure that was appropriate. Yeah?
Then maybe showing that courage, being the first to show that courage, helps create that psychological safety for others to do the same. Right, so lead by example, even though your title may not have leader in it.
Exactly.
But this is the point.
And then, of course, it's up to the leaders to make sure that they demonstrate that psychological safety. I mean, we always say that change should come from the bottom up, but also top down. The more I'm working on this topic, I think actually it's really top down. Your leaders really need to embrace it and authentically be authentic in this topic. This is, if your leaders are not authentic about, and I really liked what you were saying, Aidan, on if your leaders are showing that, it moves, right? It hits home.
It's definitely very powerful. Although I think that the younger generation also has no qualms about showing the values that they're espousing, right? And I, no, hats off to them, because they come with a very fresh look on life and with demanding that their workplace reflect their personal values as well. And I think this is very helpful for the rest of us.
On that leadership point, yes, I agree, because leaders have a special place, I guess, in that they can incentivize and value certain behaviors. And it's the aggregate of behaviors that are valued or accepted or incentivized that create a culture. So you're never going to achieve culture change, whatever that means, if you are not incentivizing and disincentivizing certain behaviors. So, and I agree with you. That's for right or for wrong, that's the position that leaders hold. They're custodians of culture in an organization because of the power, soft or otherwise, they have over what behaviors are okay in any given environment.
So how can we convince those at the top to espouse these values and to show leadership by living these values every day?
I think that may not be as difficult as maybe we are assuming it to be, because when you have these discussions or these dialogues with individual leaders, they very quickly understand the benefits. There's no challenge on sort of the moral dimension. Everyone knows this is the right thing to do, but when you can show very clearly the business benefits, and that's increasingly possible to demonstrate nowadays. Also, then all of a sudden you have a business case for behavior and culture change in this space.
And the business case is definitely there, right? So study after study from all the big consulting groups show that businesses that have a higher diversity, equity, and inclusion quotient, they outperform their peers by up to 40% or more, right? So the business case is there, and of course it's also more enjoyable from a day-to-day perspective to engage with people in this way. We have now the time ticking. Unfortunately, I'm telling you I'm going to kidnap you next time. We are now going to do the breakout session. So for those of you joining us online, you will be in an interactive session with the toolkit online. So I hope you enjoy that, and we'll meet back here in 30 minutes. And for those of you physically with us here, please look at what color you have been assigned and go to your colors. And we will also meet you back here in 30 minutes.
Welcome everyone to our online breakout session. My name is Juliane. I'm a senior manager in insurance transformation for PwC. With me today is the Women in Finance Award winner and Insurance Woman of the Year finalist 2020, Kayala, and our insurance and agility expert, Larissa Rupprecht. And in the next 25 minutes, we want to run an interactive session with you and share our proven 7 strategic aspects to assess your DEI maturity. We will also share with you the 5 fundamental principles for successful DEI programs. And at the end, we want to let you know how you can use Agile to improve your DEI maturity, and at the end, to build braver cultures. Okay, I mean, some housekeeping rules at the beginning. I know that you know that you are muted, but we will keep the chat open during the whole session. So in case you have any immediate questions, feel free to put them in the chat. But we are also planning on having a Q&A section at the end of the session. As we want to keep the session as interactive as possible, we are using Slido. So please either scan the barcode with your phone or open slido.com and just enter the respective event number there. So yeah, let's give it a first try. So considering that the DiveIn Festival is a global festival with events in 35 countries and 12 languages, we are wondering where you guys are located and where you're joining us from. So please scan the barcode or go to slido.com and share with us your location. We will give you 1 minute. Okay, so let's see. Cool. So mainly from Switzerland, from the UK, also from the US. Great. Welcome. Okay, so perfect. So thanks for sharing. And so, yeah, again, welcome everyone around the globe. So I'm really excited to be part of this. It was really amazing to hear the different views on the panel, to hear Aidan, Chubb, and Kanak, and to also view these topics through the business and the DEI lens and bringing these topics together. It was really fruitful and insightful. And now we would like to understand from you, before we start with the session, what were the key insights you heard from the panel, or what surprised you most? So we will give you again 1 more minute to share your thoughts on this. Any key insights, surprises? Yeah, let's read through it. Agile enables inclusion. Leadership is not about titles. Yeah. DI should start from the leaders. Inclusion is a feeling, mindset. Yeah. Agree. Yeah, inclusion, yeah. Importance of role modeling, exactly. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, thanks for sharing your thoughts with us. These are definitely also points that we will touch base and deep dive on today in today's session. Yeah, so let's move on. Now we want to start with the 7 strategic aspects to measure the DEI maturity. But before we start with this, let me just quickly summarize again how important the business case for diversity is. I think the business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion is stronger than ever. Taking a closer look at the diversity winners reveals what can drive real progress. Diversity wins. And also our latest report shows not only that the business case remains robust, but also that the relationship between diversity on executive teams and the likelihood of financial outperformance has strengthened over time. Because companies that care more about diversity, they meet better the customer needs, they ensure more return for business, they are more innovation friendly, they attract and retain more talents, and they improve their brand and market visibility. And what companies need now is a systematic business-led approach to inclusion and diversity, as well as bolder action on inclusion. And in order to define the right steps and initiatives, you need to understand where your companies stand in their DEI maturity. And in order to do so, PwC defined like the 7 strategic aspects where you can assess your DEI maturity. And my colleague Kayala, I will now give you more details about it. So Kayala, over to you.
Can I first check? Can you hear me clearly together? Can you see me well? Okay.
So now this is the chance for the people joining us online and of course our participants here to ask questions. Please use the QR code to enter any questions that you would like to ask anyone on the panel. We can give you a couple moments to start asking questions, or otherwise I'm happy to ask away because we're just scratching the surface of this fascinating topic. So what is Swiss Re doing in concrete terms to improve DEI?
So we're starting with the simple question.
The simple ones, of course, yeah.
Okay. So thank you for the question. I think I will answer this in terms of our refreshed strategy very quickly. So as part of that strategy, we have 3 goals. We're trying to keep it simple and straightforward. So the first goal is about rolling out an inclusion experience journey for all of us at Swiss Re. So from the GEC, the managing directors, all the way through the firm. And that's just ensuring that we all understand what inclusion means, the benefits of an inclusive environment, inclusive culture, and so on. So that's goal 1. Goal 2 is all around equity of opportunity. So we've done a significant and detailed review of our people practices and policies and processes through the lens of DEI. And this has yielded, as you might imagine, a significant amount of recommendations. And so we are working in collaboration with colleagues in different parts of organizational development, of human resources, in different country locations and geographies, to look at these practices and policies and processes to ensure that they provide equity of opportunity for all of us. So in terms of recruiting, promotions, onboarding, development, and so on and so forth. So that's goal 2. That's a massive piece of work, a very big undertaking. And the third goal is that we are putting a laser focus on several of the diversity aspects. So we had found in the past that some of the aspects of diversity were further ahead than others in terms of progress. And we want to sort of level up, bring everything up to the same level. And so our focus in diversity terms will be on gender, will be on generations, and will be on race and ethnicity. So those are the things that we are focused on for the moment. To be clear, 100% clear, this does not mean that we are in any way deprioritizing the other aspects of diversity that we have been working so hard to drive over the past number of years. But what the thinking or the rationale is, let's focus on a few first, bring them up to where they should be, and then we take a view of what else we need to do. So those are the 3 goals. So hopefully that answers the question.
And this is for both of you. Are there best practices that you could share around inclusion? You said inclusion is a feeling, but are there best practices about how this feeling can be encouraged or promoted?
So yeah, I'll continue. Sorry if I'm hogging the mic. So this is all about, inclusion is all about the behaviors that drive this sense of safety. Mm-hmm. So when we feel included, we feel like we belong. When we feel we belong, we feel braver or safer to voice an opinion that is different perhaps to other opinions that we're hearing. And when these opinions are voiced that are different, the outcomes from a business perspective are simply better, because you're getting different opinions or different views from around the table. So a lot of the work we'll be doing on inclusion is driving this culture that will yield psychological safety. That's the plan in the first instance.
So it's really personal work. It's personal work to encourage
as
people
Kanak
to
mentioned earlier.
So, and this goes back to the original theme: is what is a brave culture? It's when people step up in any level of the organization to say, I want to hear what other people think, and I want to encourage that participation.
This sorry to keep talking, but this
you don't need to keep apologizing.
This really dovetails with something else we've been doing at Swiss Re for a long time, which is called leadership from every seat. And this is all about empowering and ensuring that no matter who you are or where you are or what you do, that your voice is valuable and your opinion is valuable. So it's almost an extension of that initiative.
It almost sounds too easy, right? It should be already.
You always say this, Anna.
No, because if it were that, I mean.
Conceptually, it's not difficult.
Right.
But
there are concrete steps to be taken to enable this.
Well, when things are feelings, then that's when complexity enters the equation. Sorry, Chubb.
No, it's super interesting. Maybe just want to add, very concrete thing that we see happening in the market. I wouldn't say just in insurance, but if it's about creating more inclusion, it's really about awareness, right? How do you create awareness about what it is to be a minority, to be different? And we are starting to experiment with using virtual reality in that respect. So virtual reality really allows you to be really in the shoes of someone else. So we have these scripts where you put on the mask and all of a sudden I am a woman of color, and I'm taking 2 minutes to adapt to that, looking in the mirror, seeing myself as a woman of color, entering in a room full of middle-aged heterosexual white men that are starting to sniff. And then all of a sudden, you spoke about feeling, but then actually creating that awareness is actually all of a sudden getting in your. Remember, there's one of the scripts we use it's about a female astronaut, cosmonaut actually, it's a Russian movie, and at one point in this scene, there's a man coming in, which is actually a friend. He's actually the one who goes up, to the sky with her, but he's much bigger, and he all of a sudden comes very close to her. And it's the first time in my life that I experienced as a man, like, what it can be if a man comes a bit too close to you, even a friendly person. So I think that is something that's quite impactful. If it's about what companies can do, is using different learning techniques, and I think the virtual reality is it's really a good way of creating that lived experience that you can't really create otherwise.
If I build on that super quickly, one of the things that we're doing on our inclusion experience journey is a session where individuals are asked to remember when they were the other. And this can come from an incident or a time in childhood or in school years or in the working environment, and it all goes back to this point about feeling.
Excluded.
So if you can get someone to remember how being the other or the excluded feels, we believe that we have a better chance of, I guess, of changing behavior based on what someone feels. And that's the premise of a lot of the inclusion primer work that we're doing at the moment.
That's fantastic. So women are finally getting men to speak about their feelings.
And we could do an exercise here.
Yeah.
And we could do an exercise here. Maybe, if you want to close your eyes and remember when you were 7. Think about when you were 7 on the school playground, and you realize that all your friends had an invitation for a birthday of one of the popular kids, but you didn't. And think about what you then felt. That's exclusion. That's not a good feeling.
Yeah.
Then you're not at your
extreme
best.
vulnerability, right? So if we can step up and be there for other people.
Yeah.
So there's one that's, I'm co-chair of a gender inequality network at Chubb. And which is, I think, these employee groups, I think, are a great way to encourage sort of employee activism, or at least commitment to improve things. What is it in this gender issue, because it is still an issue? How do you make it a norm for people to say, she got this because she deserves it, and not because there is a gender issue?
I mean, this is a very real
issue.
Live
yes.
Issue, and sadly, I'm also hearing the opposite of this comment, coming from in my context in this environment, those white middle-aged men that you mentioned a moment ago who are saying things like, will I ever get a promotion? Now, I can show data from now until next week that shows that yes, if you are a white man, you will get promoted, because we're still seeing significant levels of promotion for white men. This doesn't change how someone feels. It's very difficult to change a feeling using data, and economists will know this from, centuries of their trade. People make irrational decisions and come to irrational conclusions. So it goes back to the point of you need to meet people where they are, listen to what their concerns are, and really listen to what it is that they're saying to you. I realize I'm answering a different question, but it's
okay, I'll still hold you to it.
It's the flip side of this. So again, it goes back to this point about equity that we were talking about a little bit earlier. So do we truly believe that there is equity of opportunity in our firms and in our industries? And if we can get to a point where people believe that that's the case, then I think we will see this quote reduce.
Reduce, yeah. And I think it goes back to what we've, a common theme that keeps being discussed here is the personal courage to question your own biases, right? So how we can do that as individuals, how can we help as teams do that for other people as well? How can you encourage people to even start the exploration of what their personal biases could be?
Well, it's also, as we said earlier, it's about speaking up, and it can be very small things. It can be the microaggressions.
Yes.
That are happening all the time. People raising their eyes or interrupting. Women are always still much more interrupted than men. And what you can do is amplifying. If this lady has been promoted, amplify that it's because of her performance and her presence and impact, not because it's a woman. And maybe you need to do it a bit more for women than for men. That's what it is.
And keep encouraging unconscious bias training, right? This is
Question in the room?
please.
Thanks a lot. I was curious to know, I know employment engagement surveys are a great way to take the temperature check from an organisation, but is there any other cool ways we can measure moving that needle in the D&I space? Because as you said, Aidan, it's the feeling, and that's it's intangible and it's hard to capture feelings in a way. So I was curious to know from Jupe and yourself and Anna if there was any new ways or more advanced ways of checking in and getting data and metrics around that.
Yeah.
I think one of the things, if allow me, one of the things we I guess lots of organizations doing this now is, making the ERGs setting ERGs up in a more professional way, with clear objectives and goals. ERGs, employee resource groups, they originated from, let's say, enthusiasts that want to advocate. Whereas I see more and more organizations actually taking that a level further and actually tasking the ERGs with taking that pulse and making sure that leaders start to know what they understand what they don't know. So that upward feedback, and also what we do a lot is actually working with focus groups and interview and conversations. You don't know what you don't know, so you need to listen, right? And I think specifically in the hybrid setting, I've been fascinated. We discussed earlier about this, the quiet quitting. I've been fascinated by that. You think that you got everyone. You're looking at a screen and there's 9 faces. You actually don't know what they're doing and if they're with you at that moment in time. So, engagement survey gives you a pulse and gives you figures and data, but it's also, I think, at that moment in time when you are there as a leader, just checking, is everyone okay? Are we still there? Going in the right direction? Being a bit modest as well as a leader. You don't need to, do your monologue. It's actually a conversation. So be modest and invite people to share their thoughts and their concerns. And it's a continuous journey, right? I think most of you are probably also leaders, people leaders. It's really a continuous journey about understanding how do you have impact. Hope it answers your question, Aidan, from your side.
So I'll be very honest. I haven't come across any super smart way of taking that temperature, other than employee experience surveys are getting more sophisticated, and so there are surveys now that on the market that will measure not just what an individual says, but in the background measure the what they would really say, or what they really feel, or they really think. And the stats on that are quite startling. I've seen some of these studies and some of these survey outcomes, and the difference between the reported answer to some of these questions and statistically adjusted results for the same questions are really quite stark. They're a really big difference. But to build on your point, the best gauge of a culture, in my experience, in an organization, really is the stories that people tell each other.
Yes.
And if you as a line manager or team leader can tap into those stories, that's a very rich seam of data and information.
It's in the informal exchanges actually where this comes out.
It's tricky. It's very hard to do with any degree of reliability, but it's important. I mean, what's the most important leadership characteristic? I would suggest listening is high up there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's creating those safe spaces for those informal exchanges to take place, right? So whether it be allyships where people have sort of an oath of confidentiality and people can trust and share experiences and stories, because it is in those stories that you get the real temperature check. Absolutely. There are a lot of questions. I would love childcare costs to be socialized in Switzerland. It's extremely expensive. I'm not personally in touch with any governmental officials though, but I think that this would go a long way in creating more equitable society. Gentlemen.
I have not been speaking with the government about that topic either. We were involved in the Swiss law on equal pay. There we were kind of part of the conversation, but this is. I think, I'm from the Netherlands originally, then I moved to France, my children were born in France, and then we moved to Switzerland. And I remember that we literally could not move to Switzerland because of childcare. Yeah. The children were taken care of as of 2 years old in France, and here they would just have been, and it's so different across Europe. If you see the female participation rate across Europe, there is a direct correlation between childcare facilities and female participation rates
in the workforce,
because it keeps women out of the workforce. And that's the other question as well about the pandemic. Yes, the pandemic hit women harder than men. First of all, because of a lot of the industries where women are overrepresented were hit harder, but also the role of caregiver, specifically for children, is still in many societies a role that is allocated explicitly to women. And children, homeschooling had more impact on women than on men.
Yes.
So that was kind of a reality check, huh?
Absolutely. I think one of the events that we want to put together for the Gender and Equality Network at Chubb is to really explore what kind of equality you have at home, because that equality directly reflects the equality that you can expect to have in the workplace. So it's and a part of this, as we were speaking of before, is what kind of parental leave policies are there? In the Nordic countries, that seems completely normal. There are 2 parents. Equal set of parental leave policies. I wish that would trickle down east and west as well. But this is also determinant, isn't it? I mean, the 2 parents have an equal share of the housework, an equal share of life in general. And we were also speaking about how how much of a strong and determinant experience it is to become a parent, right? So it's not just how can we accommodate families, it's how can we recognize the super you that you become as a parent and what that adds to your business, right? What that adds to your leadership, what that adds to your multitasking capacities, what that adds to your creativity. This is
So two things super quickly. I think this is an interesting direction of conversation because...
And it can last another hour.
Well, now we're starting to think about what role do companies like ours and corporates like us and our policies and practices, what role do they play in shaping versus reflecting the cultures and societies in which we operate and are based? And I think that's a discussion maybe for another day, but it's a super interesting one.
Yes.
And I need to make a really shameless plug at this point. I'm sorry, because in relation to the childcare point, and because I see my colleague Lorenzo here in the room, and we opened last week beginning of September. Thank you. Our kids' house here at Swiss Re, which is quite groundbreaking. It's not just the normal childcare facility, but actually it's in place for when it's needed, and that really we hope will provide a bit of flexibility in tandem or conjunction with our Own the Way You Work approach here at Swiss Re too. So. Sorry, shameless plug over.
Wonderful.
It's one of the things that
Congratulations as well.
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah, no, I'm super proud of the work that Lorenzo has done and the stance that Swiss Re in Zurich has taken.
Well, I'm glad that you guys have taken that direction. I know that Chubb has a similar direction with regard to providing childcare services when they're needed for both parents. I mean, it's also recognizing that especially what I see as a trend in the younger generation of fathers, that they want to be more present at home than previous generations. And I think this can only help improve things in general. And we are unfortunate. Yes. Okay.
I just wanted to bounce back on the comment you made around the group CEO, walking to talk, at least on the rhetoric side of things, and the impact that it would have. How actually he is making the leaders of that company accountable of those commitments, and how this accountability is being transparent to everyone in the company, and to which level of degree. I mean, it's definitely linked to measurement, right? So how is that done within Swiss Re?
Thank you for the question. So very concretely, the senior leaders in the firm have, for example, gender representation and gender promotion targets in their MBOs. It's as simple as that, and it's a question that comes up throughout the year. Also, we're challenged as part of our succession planning processes. We monitor and measure female talent on succession plans, their potential ratings, and these are all hard metrics that we talk about and on which people are measured, incentivized, and rewarded.
Are there forums where best practices are shared?
Like this?
Yes. Yes.
Within the firm, or you mean across firms?
Across, sort of industry.
I think there are. I mean, I think we were talking about this earlier, that PwC host these coffee conversations.
Yeah. What I really like about working in this area is that if you speak with global heads of D&I, then people just share. People genuinely want to make the workplace a better place, and there is no competition. What we do often with our clients is actually, because clients always ask us, so what are others doing? Yeah. Tell me what others are doing. And generally, the answer is, well, that's actually relatively important. What's important is what are your objectives, and how you want to get there. Nonetheless, what could be interesting is sharing. So we organize these company visits, as we call it, and we just put people around the table and say let's share. And we facilitate the discussion, and we have this monthly coffee talk now since a few months, and there's lots of enthusiasm, and it's really exciting to see how people want to share and genuinely learn from each other, and to simply make a more equitable and inclusive work environment. I think that's really exciting, actually, working in this field.
How can recruitment practices be optimized in this sense?
So there's some very tactical ways. And I'm sure many firms are doing the same thing. So are interview panels diverse? So are the people doing the interviewing and the questioning and sifting the CVs and are they representative? Number one. Secondly, is representation equal at the final stages of selection? Because what I'm sure others will have found the same thing. You start off with a great equal slate of candidates, and by some dark art, by the time you get to the final 2 or 3, they're all men.
Look like the boss.
So that's something we measure very actively as well.
And then promotion practices would follow the same.
Promotion would fall in there, succession, talent development practices, and so on and so forth. So yeah, there are really tactical things you can put in place.
But just to add, I think if it comes to recruitment, the first thing to do is to think about what is actually the candidate we need, and not just to take a copy of the person that is leaving or an existing job description, but first think about what is the capability we need. And it's not per se someone that looks like us, because we already have people that look like us, right? Maybe we need a different kind of mind, a different kind of person, because to bring in a different perspective. Then absolutely make sure you get panels with diverse people. Make sure you have standardized questions. Yeah. Don't go unprepared into a conversation with a candidate, because then it's really the split-second decision you made it. I like the person, I don't like the person. No, you have these 5 questions. You ask the same 5 questions to your 5 candidates, and then you can have an objective comparison of that. Using psychometric tests, Actually, what I'm trying to say is you need to try to objectivize the process as much as you can. And that's how you, on responding to your earlier question, how can you debias the processes? Well, you come up with these kind of procedures and steps in which you basically objectivize it as much as possible, whether it's recruitment, whether it is promotion and performance ratings, but also in the more, let's say, informal people management decisions, like who do you invite on a special project? Yep. There is this prestigious project. With who do you go for lunch? Who do you? And here is also the complexity of hybrid working, right? People are closer to you. They're in the office. They're probably doing better. Right. People that are further away, that's the distance bias as well. So there's all sorts of things, and then I do think we need to train each other.
No, that's very true, because
to understand that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because in hiring you always hire for attitude, right? But what does that attitude mean? It means that it's someone you like, because they probably reflect your thinking, and this is really hard to challenge. As a line manager, I know that it was much easier to say, well, this person will fit right into our culture because we're all like-minded. Well, how do I challenge that, and how do I say maybe I need someone who actually challenges our thinking so that we can come up with new ideas and go beyond what we're doing?
What we've started to try to do here, and I realize we're getting time signals from the back of the room here.
I had to be late at some point, so this is ensure
that people in teams, instead of fitting in, we're starting to talk about fitting together, and that's a useful pivot when you're talking to line managers about making hiring decisions. Okay.
We knew the time was going to be too short. Thank you so much for joining us in this panel. I'd like to thank my fellow panelists, Chubb, Aidan, and of course Kanak. I'm not even sure if she's still with us, but thank you so much. Thank you for the organizers. Aidan already thanked the organizers, but thank you for Swiss Re, for Swiss Re's invitation. Thank you for letting us use the auditorium. Thank you for the questions and for your participation. This, of course, was just scratching the surface of a very passionate and complex topic, but all the things that we've spoken about today, about, let's say, having the courage to step forward, to challenge your own biases, to challenge maybe things that you see that you would like to see challenged in the organization where you work. It's maybe your role to do so, even though leader might not be in your title. This is the brave culture that we want to create, right? To really encourage people to speak to their values, and at the same time to encourage their own personal biases. So there's a lot of work to be done, both personally and from top leadership, line managers. This is just, it's frustrating that the time was so short, but I think a lot of the important things are, it's not just the right thing to do, right? To be open to different cultures and differences in thinking, but it's also the key to helping us go and find solutions to complex problems, because the world is becoming more complex. We're trying to transform our industry. We're trying to transform the solutions that we come up with, and try to match the expectations of the customer base that is also changing. So we want to reflect and stay relevant, and we need a broader set of skills and a broader set of perspectives in order to stay relevant in the world as it's changing. And I'd hate to end it, but we have to end it. Thank you so much for coming, and we look forward to the next one.